Certainly been some attention paid in the news recently to a movement among churches here in the United States to actually shelter refugees from Central America right inside the church, even though these are illegal aliens, and church members who help them could get up to 15 years in prison if they are successfully prosecuted. You actually visited one of these churches, didn't you, Tom?
Yes, I did, Eileen. I want to set this interview up for people so they understand. The interview was done in the old Cambridge Baptist Church, of course, in Cambridge. The woman's name is Estela. It is an assumed name. We're protecting her identity. Also, you will notice when you see her that she wears a bandana over her face and a hat, so she masks her identity. Not, there she is now, not so much because she fears reprisal to herself fleeing here to the United States, but because she fears revenge shown against her 3 children who remain in El Salvador with the protection of their family. Very poor, destitute really, she and her husband began to fight the wretched, horrendous situations in the work sphere. Her husband was arrested and assassinated. You'll hear her story in a moment. I should say, too, that she has fled to the United States with the help of a human rights organization. You will hear, too, in this interview that we have used an interpreter. And the photographs that she refers to are not her personal photographs, but they are photographs that appear in this book, a book entitled El Salvador.
Let's now join this interview that Tom did from the old Cambridge Baptist Church.
What were you doing? What happened when you were first arrested?
When they first arrested me, I was doing organizing work, and I was in the union organizing headquarters, and they arrested me with 9 other people.
You say that you were tortured, Estela. What did they do to you?
The kinds of tortures, they go after your head and the other parts of your body, and sometimes they rape women.
You were arrested 3 times. Were you tortured each of those 3 times?
The second time, they gave me electric shocks.
Where?
Where? ¿Dónde?
Esto fue en el batallón Atlacat, que queda un departamento.
¿En qué parte del cuerpo?
Bueno, los choques eléctricos.
They put them to my head, to my hands, to my feet, and here to my knees.
Todos fuimos arrestados.
And they took many of us, and we were all sent to the jail, and they tortured us in different places, but all in the same way.
Did you ever see any American, North American, I should say, officers?
The third time that I was captured, the person who was in charge of the whole operation was a North American advisor. He was in military uniform when I was arrested, and he later was present during the torture sessions in civilian clothes.
Estela, what were the work conditions that you were experiencing that you wanted to change? Can you give me some examples of these conditions?
For example, we had to arrive at work at 7:30 in the morning. If we arrived at 7:35, they would take the whole day's work pay from us. Always afraid because there are at least 30 to 40 soldiers lined up around the factory and inside the factory with their guns, and then there are guard towers around the factories.
Any other conditions you want to describe that you fought against?
Of course, I felt very frustrated. I knew of cases of workers that were working with me who were treated very badly, women workers who were forced to have sex with men, the owners of the factories.
And what got you and your husband politically involved?
Because there was a great need for this kind of organizing work, and we didn't want to be exploited anymore.
But you knew that you might have trouble if you did protest, did you not?
Yes, we know that we will be in trouble when we do this kind of work, and that maybe they might even kill us or certainly capture us and torture us, but we know we have at least made an effort to help.
They also imprisoned your husband, is that correct?
He was captured on the 7th of April. On that same day, he was killed. 2 days after he was killed, I was captured.
How does a person know that he or she is on a death list?
When one begins to work in this kind of work, such as union organizing, you know that you're in danger, and you know that at some point they will probably put you on a death list. Here in the United States, the people don't hear from the press what is happening. They just get a picture filled with roses about El Salvador. When one sees so many bodies and so many deaths, a terrible rage comes inside you, and you know you really have to work hard. How is it that we can ignore it or even be happy when we know that the government forces come to a house and they take a whole entire family and kill them all when the woman is asking, please, please don't kill me or my children? How is it that one kneels and says, please, please don't kill my children, and asks for pardon when one knows that this soldier in front of them is much more powerful and they have a gun and all one has is one's voice?
Why did you leave El Salvador? You left your children. Why did you leave?
Since I had been arrested 3 times, my family was very frightened that I would be arrested again, and we decided that it would be better that I would leave and that it would be safer for the children that I would leave them. It would be difficult to bring them with me.
Did your children understand your decision?
They're very young, and it's very difficult for them to understand everything that I try to explain to them. But my oldest son says that perhaps it's much better that I be out of the country than dead, as his father is.
Why did you come to the United States? Wouldn't you have been safer in Mexico or Canada?
It's precisely because this country is the one that is causing so much trouble in El Salvador, because it's so involved in the military there. And it's because in this country it's very important that the public knows this, that what is happening in our country is there's so much intervention from the United States. And they talk about democracy in our country when in fact every single day people are arrested and tortured and people appear, cadavers appear with their throats slit.
How do you feel being here now with your children in El Salvador? Your husband has been assassinated. Surely you must fear for your life. What thoughts, what feelings go through you?
It's very hard for me to think about my husband and my children, and the fact that they might arrest me and kill me. But if they would do that someday, at least I know that I have been able to give a message to the people in North America about what is the real life down there.
We want you now to meet 2 members of the Old Cambridge Baptist Church where Estela is now living as a refugee. Peggy Smith works as an administrator, the administrator of the congregation, as well as being a member. And Susan Weatherall acted as the translator in Tom's interview. And this is amazing because you could have been arrested during the course of that interview. Police could have come in. She is an illegal alien. Why did you decide to do this?
First of all, I would argue that she is not an illegal alien. One of the reasons we have decided to do this is because we're not only obeying what we believe is the law of God, but the law of our land. For example, in 1980, the Refugee Act was passed, which says that people fleeing oppression or fear of arrest in their own country have the right to refuge in the United States. And therefore, we see these people not as illegal aliens, but as refugees.
Why is she being housed in a church, I guess is my question, rather than in a center where she could have refuge?
I think it's a moral issue as far as the church needing to respond to the human conditions that are going on in Central America, and the church having a need to give her protection so that she can tell her story, so that we can inform the people of North America what is going on in Central America.
This is like the Underground Railroad during the slavery days, in a way. I mean, is there a comparison?
Yes.
There's quite a parallel. In fact, here in Boston, the Tremont Church was a station in the Underground Railroad. There's a history of sanctuary in the church.
Maybe we ought to clear up for people, and I think it's important, and I think they would want to ask these questions. Is Estela a communist?
We don't know. Okay. And we feel that that's not important. What she really clearly is a refugee from oppression.
Okay. Do you two, having traveled in Latin America and El Salvador, do you have evidence, not just of death squads, we all are assuming that they exist, do you have evidence that North Americans, people from the United States, are participating in this kind of dictatorial activity? Have you seen it? Do you know it?
We have Estela's testimony that you just heard in the interview. Also, the Globe article today talks about the number. There's a report that is being made to the one of the congressional committees about the fact that the number of advisors fluctuates almost double what the administration is representing the number as being. They say that there are 55 military advisors in El Salvador, and a front page article on the Globe today talks about how that is not the case, and in fact we're spending something like double the amount of money that we're sending down there is military aid as opposed to humanitarian aid.
Doesn't the CIA, isn't the Contra in Nicaragua backed by the CIA, so is there a rollover into El Salvador? You've been there, Peggy. What did you see?
The kinds of things that we saw in Nicaragua and the kinds of things we saw in El Salvador were very different. In El Salvador, which is allegedly a democracy, on every street corner we saw soldiers wearing machine guns?
Machine guns,
yes. And a terrible amount of daily oppression. There's something called the tumulos, which are these speed bumps. Every few blocks there are speed bumps which cause your car to slow down so that the military can look in and see who's traveling, who's going by, who's traveling with whom.
Well, are we supposed to understand that this is a democracy fighting communist infiltration? Is that what we are, as Americans, supposed to believe and understand?
That's exactly. So that your question, when you ask, is she a communist, feeds right into that whole issue of this, we've got to fight those communists.
Well, that's why I asked
from the soft underbelly of the United States down there in Central America. In fact, I lived in Nicaragua under Somoza, and he was considered at that time a bulwark against communism. At the same time, people were being tortured. They were being skinned alive and rolled in salt.
But now Sandinista,
now
what is
we say Somoza was terrible. I've been to Nicaragua since then, and I felt very safe on the streets. There weren't policemen around looking at me and making sure and stopping me.
But in El Salvador, it's the opposite. There are people, you say, Peggy. What happens to this woman? I mean, what kind of a future does she have anywhere? Could somebody come in and kill her to stop her from speaking?
We don't feel that in the United States, that they would come in and kill her. They would certainly deport her.
Which would have the same effect.
Susan, who does Estela blame for her situation right now, and how do you feel, as a second part, being a citizen of North America, we have to be careful to say, when you've seen what goes on in Latin America and you are giving sanctuary to this woman? Who does she blame? How do you feel?
I think she blames capitalism to a certain extent for the poverty. It's an issue of poverty, not ideology, actually, so I shouldn't really say capitalism. I think she blames poverty, and she sees that the money makers are keeping her at earning for a 12-hour day $2.50.
It's amazing.
Right, 6 days a week.
And your second question?
Second, how do you feel? You have been in South America, Latin America, North America. How do you feel? The same question I asked her, I would ask you. You're reading the press every day. What is the truth, and how do you feel when the truth isn't told?
I'm really hurting. I'm really hurting because this is my country, and I really love this country, and I feel that we are supporting immoral governments in Chile, in El Salvador, many governments, even in South Africa, and someday we're going to end up supporting one here. It just seems to me that if we continue to support people being slaughtered, when is that going to wash up on our shores?
Why would a government of our strength and our democracy and our Constitution do such a thing? Why?
They don't want the story to be heard. I don't think.
What story?
What's happening in Central America, Peggy?
They don't want people like Estela telling their stories, informing people of what's going on and calling to attention what our government is doing.
We have a little bit of a clip, do we not, of Estela speaking? Could we show that this is kind of Estela's message to you and to me, to you and to us? Do we have that now, that little piece of that interview?
El americano luche pues y haga manifestaciones y mande cartas de protesta por lo que este gobierno está haciendo por nuestro país.
I would hope that the people in this country rise up and have demonstrations to show that they don't believe in what the government of this country is doing in our country, that they would send letters to their government telling them how they feel.
You both put yourself at very serious risk, but it means this much, I take it, huh?
Do you have children?
We don't, the two of us do, yes.
They're killing children down there. And I have a child. Peggy has a child.
Stella has 3.
I'm afraid that if we allow it to happen there, when
In
is it
our
gonna-
name.
In our name.
Oh, such an issue.
It is an issue, and I think one of the great tragedies of this issue, Eileen, and I'm sure everybody hearing, is we have heard it again, year in, year out, with
Yeah,
this
it doesn't
country, with other
stop.
countries, and